Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Min's Minute Modcast. Today, my special guest is Yasmin. Hey, Yasmin.
Hi, Min. Lovely to be here.
It's great to be in front of a TEDx speaker, so I'm humbled that you're on my little show.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so we have three questions. My first question is, can you share a story of how an organization transformed its culture to be more inclusive towards dealing with people that have a disability?
Sure. I do something called the wheelchair challenge. I'm a wheelchair user myself, and a lot of organizations have taken part in this wheelchair challenge, where basically it gives people more personal experience dealing with the reality of living with a disability. So this particular firm I'm thinking about, they had 5 members of their leadership team spending a working day in a wheelchair. And through that experience, the firm was hoping that those key people who had leadership positions would gain a much deeper insight into sometimes the non-visible realities faced by people living with a disability, whether physical or mental. So that initiative really started conversations, got people talking about all aspects about disability. It's a very in-your-face initiative. Sometimes people may be very uncomfortable around it, but it's definitely got disability inclusion on the agenda.
Amazing. Now, what moment early in your career showed you the real need for disability inclusion?
Yeah, so I acquired my disability during my working life. So I was 29, and it was in 2008 when I acquired my disability. And I was working as a lawyer at the time. And so when I returned to work in 2009 as a lawyer and being a full-time wheelchair user, I realized very, very early on that firms such as mine talked about things like diversity and inclusion, but people with disabilities were often the forgotten group. They were not included as part of that conversation. You know, there were lots of other employee networks for staff members, LGBT, gender, race and ethnicity, but there was nothing about disability and health conditions, even though disabled people or people with health conditions make up the largest minority group worldwide. There was a lack of focus on this issue.
Wow. Okay. Have you faced resistance starting disability inclusion talks, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, they're usually objections before you start, and you've got to deal with those objections. So one of the great myths is, well, we don't have any disabled people in this organization. So many people think that disability is just visible, you know, sticks and wheelchairs. In fact, the reality is the vast majority of disabilities are not visible. In fact, the statistic is between 70 and 80% of disabilities are not visible. So the way I've overcome those assumptions is to educate people that disability is a much broader concept than perhaps that they think. Maybe, you know, you don't identify with the label of disabled, but people could be legally disabled, which means they have protection under the law, and therefore they're entitled to reasonable adjustments and also not to face discrimination in the workplace. And it's the Equality Act 2010 in the UK, which is the legislation here. So disability can be as broad as dyslexia, ADHD, mental health conditions, chronic fatigue, neurodiversity, cancer as well can be classed as a disability. So it's very much a majority issue, disability inclusion, not a minority issue. It's a group any of us can belong to if we're not a member already. Some more stats for you, Min. You know, 1 in 4 of us will live with a disability at any point in our lives in the UK, and 87% of disabled people acquire their disability during their working life. And I fell into that category. So it's busting myths and misconceptions, bringing about education and awareness. That's how I deal with resistance and objections.